Good afternoon. I'm Ed Pozzuoli, CEO of Tripp Scott, and today we're welcome State Senator Jeff Brandis. Jeff is represents the center of Pinellas County, St. Pete on down, and before that he was a veteran in the Iraq War. So thank you for serving in the U.S. Army.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. He's up for re-election this year, but we're going to talk a little bit about transportation and autonomous vehicles. I know something that you're a statewide leader on. So talk to me a little bit about what transportation issues that Florida faces. How do we deal with the robust economy, people wanting to move down from all those states up north and all those high-tax states up north? How do we got to deal with the traffic and transportation issues?
So Florida has about 21 million people today, and it's expected to grow by another 6 million people by 2030. So incredible growth in this state, and we're really excited about the opportunities that's going to create for us to think about changing our transportation system. And you're starting to hear all of these discussions. All of the cities are more or less dealing with the same set of issues about what do we do? How do we make investments in the future? And the great thing is there's new technologies that are coming online that are really going to open up new options. And we're just starting to see these emerge. I'm somebody who believes that the world we're emerging towards is shared. We're seeing this with the emergence of Uber and Lyft. It's getting more electric. We're seeing this with Tesla and now Jaguar and all the major manufacturers bringing on electric vehicles. Right. And I think it's going to be something more self-driving as well, as we're seeing companies like Google and Apple and all of the other major manufacturers move into the self-driving car space. So it's exciting to see all these technologies beginning to emerge that I think are going to reshape our cities, reshape our transportation and how we move around the state.
But when it comes to transportation, Senator, the municipalities play a role, but realistically speaking, it's a statewide issue or a regional issue that needs to be addressed. How do we get people, out of their cars and into something other than their own driven cars? I've traveled 95 along the east. You've traveled 75 on the west coast. It's jammed.
It is.
And more people are coming because our economy is booming and the sunshine never stops.
Right.
But how do we address those things, whether it's autonomous vehicles or some sort of other public transportation?
So I think you're going to see a few different trends emerge. One, I think it is largely going to be this kind of shared self-driving trend that is really what I think you and I are going to experience in the future. And I think just like our parents kind of went from the horse and buggy to the Model T, the next 10 years for Florida is going to look like our great-grandparents' experience with that change. As these kind of shared electric self-driving vehicles come online, the ability for us to tailor trips to what we want to do and tailor trips to our specific needs and desires are going to be available to us in ways we've never seen before. And so if I wanted to drive from St. Petersburg all the way over to Fort Lauderdale, maybe I want to drive in a vehicle that's shared so I can have 2 or 3 other people jump in on that trip. Because it's self-driving, maybe it can go drive a little bit faster so we can get here in under 2 or 3 hours, which would completely change the dynamic of a trip across the state. I think those are the types of opportunities that are going to be available to us. But I think it's going to reshape our cities as well. I mean, you think about this city and how much space is dedicated towards parking.
Parking, yeah.
And so allows us to rethink parking. Even the buildings that we're in, the lobby of a building now becomes kind of a transportation hub. Today it's somebody walks through the parking structure, through the lobby to the elevator. But in the future, lobbies of buildings really will have a different purpose as we think about the transportation hub that they become to get us home as we kind of wait for this kind of shared electric and autonomous vehicle to pick us up and take us home.
I mean, I could see the autonomous vehicles and some of those shared vehicles impacting mostly some of our, as we get older.
Absolutely.
The aging population in Florida, sort of giving them freedom to be able to take a long drive or
Right.
go down from Fort Lauderdale to Miami or Pinellas across to Fort Lauderdale as an example. I mean, how do you envision that? I mean, to me, that's just a question of freedom.
Yeah, so this technology will be, I believe, the single largest shift you and I see in our lifetimes. So our cell phone changed how you and I interact with the world, but these vehicles will change both the physical space, but also allow mobility to such a much larger range of individuals, from those who have severe disabilities to the elderly to even kids that are a little bit younger,
right.
To allow them to have some freedom and flexibility as well. It fundamentally will change how Florida and frankly the country looks over the next few years.
And how does, say, the continuing growth and the use of autonomous vehicles as you see the future unfold, how does that interact with, say, like Brightline that just came on in Fort Lauderdale to Miami and to Palm Beach and soon to be to Orlando, or other rails like that?
So the single largest challenge we face in transportation and frankly transit is what we call the first and last mile problem. How do I get you from your home to the bus stop, from the bus stop to your final place of business? Oftentimes that first and last mile takes more in time, energy, and effort than the rest of the trip.
That's the expensive
Right,
piece.
that's exactly right. Because that's an individual mile versus the mass transit mile of the rest of the trip. So if we can offer a kind of a shared electric and self-driving mode for that first and last mile, whether that be via bike, whether that be via scooter, which is coming online in some cities, or via a self-driving shuttle that you can share with other people to reduce the cost. But we think we can get the cost of that last mile down to 20 or 30 cents, which is radically cheaper than we've ever been able to provide first and last mile transportation.
And when that happens, more people will use it.
Well, more people will use that, more people will use mass transit.
Right.
All of those things start to make sense again, because we'll be able to solve some of the really tough problems, which is how to get you from your home to the bus stop or to the train station and vice versa.
Now, Senator, you're running for re-election.
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about, your 4 years, should you be re-elected? What else is on the priority list for Jeff Miranda?
So our office is really a policy shop, and we really pride ourselves in being able to do deep dives into public policy. We think there's one big idea in every area of policy, and we love to take those big ideas on. So whether that's self-driving cars, which we think is the big idea in transportation, flood insurance, which is so important for Florida. We've been able to create a private flood insurance market in this state over the last 4 years because we think that's the big idea in property insurance and frankly for homeowners. And we also work on education. So on the education front, I'm a big fan of mastery-based learning. I'll think about kids learning to level up. They love games. They learn to level up in games, but we haven't taken that same idea and moved it into education yet. And so mastery-based learning allows them to level up at their own pace and gain that knowledge when they're ready for it. And we think we're kind of the gamification of education is something I'm really excited about and want to continue to work on. But my heart's really in criminal justice reform. 4 years is about them enough time to really take on a big issue and change the trajectory of the state. So Florida has about 96,000 people incarcerated in the state, but we have huge challenges in the Department of Corrections.
Right.
We're facing about a 2,000 guard shortage. I mean, as the economy improves, less and less people decide to make their career of being a prison guard.
Right.
And so we have massive shortages of guards for our prison system right now. We have a lot of challenges as far as just funding the criminal justice system
cost
overall.
alone.
That's exactly right. From mental health to fighting certain diseases, like we're going to spend over $40 million just this year on hepatitis C in our prison system. And so we have really profound challenges of both mental health, opioids, specific disease states, this kind of evolving standard of care in the corrections. And so I think we need to be focused on how do we reduce the size of our prison population, put more officers on the street, really focus on the best practices of law enforcement and of the judicial system. And what does that look like in the future? How do we get that number down instead of it continuing to grow and encompassing billions of dollars of the state's resources? Because right now, I believe we're warehousing individuals. We're not.
How do we move away from warehousing to keeping more people productive?
Sure. So a couple of different things. One, we need to focus on our sentencing because it all starts with sentencing. And so how do we reimagine the Florida sentencing code? We have over 100 mandatory minimums in this state, where we remove all the flexibility from the judges and we place it with the prosecutors. And so let's let our judges be judges. Let's let them do what we pay them to do, which is look at the individual facts of the case and both practice justice along with grace and recognize that each individual case has some different mitigating factors and aggravating factors to the case and allow them to dispense justice versus the one-size-fits-all Tallahassee model, which is, oh, we know better and you got caught with X amount of pills and therefore the mandatory minimum for that is 15 years. That, one pill can make the difference in Florida law between you serving 8 years or 15 years.
Right.
And that makes no sense to me. So I think we start there, but then we have to make investments in the Department of Corrections itself. I toured a prison just a few months ago. 1,100 inmates, 1 teacher. And so those types
how do you
of things.
expect how do you expect rehabilitation?
Right, that's
It's not
exactly right.
possible.
We're not rehabilitating. In fact, just last month, the department announced that it was going to cut its transition services by up to 40%. So these are people that are on a work release, that are transitioning back in.
Right.
And if without transition services, what happens is you serve your time, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon they give you $50 and a bus pass and say go with peace. Go live your life. But you haven't detoxed, you haven't transitioned back into society.
Right.
It takes time to decompress from a prison where you've served for 5 years back into
Especially as the world's moving so fast.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've served 10 or 15 years, Twitter, Facebook, Uber, all of these things are kind of new to you.
Right.
And we need to reintegrate you, but get you back connected with the skills necessary to succeed in a job in order to transition back into a productive member of society. And we're not doing that today. And the exciting thing, though, is that this movement in the Department of Corrections is really being led, and criminal justice reform is really being led by red states. And so I think it's a Republican issue, it's a Republican message, it's a faith-based message. I'm somebody who believes in grace. I believe that what we do for the least of these matters. And so I think for me, it's an issue where Florida can be a leader. And can address the opioid crisis, it can address the mental health crisis, it can address the Department of Corrections, but it takes somebody with the courage and the vision to step up and lead in Tallahassee, and we haven't had that in years.
Well, Senator, thank you for joining us and sharing your passion and frankly, your grace on these issues, and we do appreciate your service. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you.